This afternoon session is when we really are going to get into expanding the horizons of Texas history. Every new generation that comes up is a challenge. And when you're teaching fourth grade Texas history, you're sort of the point of the spear, dealing with all those kids who are coming up and either don't know anything or know things they need to unlearn. I've found that with many of my students, I have to unlearn them before I can learn them. Sometimes it's part of the same process. I've watched Betsy Davis in action, not as her student, but in her classroom, and seeing how her students relate to her. And I've seen her take her students to the Alamo, and I've seen her students taken by her, at least the creme de la creme, to academic conferences. And I guess the one that sticks in my mind is a little girl whose name I don't know, who came up to me in the Alamo gift shop and said, "We love Mrs. Davis. She is awesome." And I think that has been ratified by the Sons of the Republic of Texas today. I don't think I will have any argument when I introduce Betsy Davis, who's won a number of awards already before today for her teaching. I don't think I'll have any argument if I introduce her, at least for the moment, as the best darn teacher of Texas history and the best darn teacher in Texas.
Wow, that's quite an honor. You know, there are a lot of teachers in here that probably deserve to be up here just as much as I do. Just like things in history, things happen to you because you're there at the right place and time. About 8 years ago, I was asked by a parent if her husband's college roommate could come speak to my class about Texas history. And of course I said yes, and Marcia mentioned his name, and I briefly wrote it down in my plan book about when James Crisp was going to show up. Well, I didn't know James from anybody else at that point in time, and you know, I didn't realize what a treat my class was going to be in store for, and how it would impact my life and theirs. James was working on the paintbrush and the knife, the Texas creation, myth, and silencing of history. It was along about the same time the De La Peña diary was being given validity. And mid-morning, Dr. Chris showed up full of enthusiasm, his eyes twinkling just like they do today, and begins talking to my class and sharing with these fourth graders pieces of artwork that depict Texas history. And you know, from that moment on, I realized that this was something special. He was going to be returning later in the week for a Texas History Symposium or something down at the LBJ Library, where they would be discussing the De La Peña diary. Of course, I thought, what a great learning opportunity. I think I had 10 kids show up with me that morning, and we sat down and began listening to a guy named Bill Groneman defend the legend of Davy Crockett, and that he must have died swinging old Betsy the way he did, and that the De La Peña diary was a forgery. And that an hour-long documentary about the Mexican officer's famous memoir, The De La Peña Diary by Brian Uberman, was shown. And I believe also that Dr. Chris spoke in the defense of the authenticity of the diary. But like most history, it's only as good as someone's recollection. We witnessed, and as you get older, you know, it's like your recollection isn't always as good. We witnessed history being debated, written history being questioned. My students were so engaged and felt so confident that they were up at the microphone asking, you know, these historians and these you know, experts questions. You know, we all left feeling just so empowered. And it gave my students permission to question history, and they began to look at events more closely. They became history detectives. It changed how my classroom explores Texas history. The next thing you know, I'm receiving a phone call from a person who's involved in this Peter Jennings book on In Search for America. And I guess it was James who had turned them on to my kids, because several of them were interviewed about how they learned history and what got them involved in history, and ended up being quoted in his book. So they were all excited because they were now part of written history. I stayed in occasional contact with the professor through the years, and it happened to be that my class was touring the Alamo last year, and we bumped into each other. My children, of course, recognize this famous movie star from the viewing of the History Channel's, the Alamo, and they also had heard my stories of meeting him and seen his slides that depict Texas's history through art. Now, they all wanted his autograph, and they rushed right up to the display case where he was speaking with such enthusiasm. And once again, he captured their attention. Dr. Crisp again enchanted my students, shared his love for Texas history, and this chance meeting led me here today. Dr. Crisp's enthusiasm for history and learning has inspired both my students and myself. My fascination for history began with the multitude of stories my father shared based on his recollection of historical events. Wherever we traveled, he would say, oh, there's Dog Canyon, and blank, blank, blank happened there, and oh, over here was, I grew up in El Paso, over here was where A.B. Falls did whatever. And I wanted my students, to walk away with this same kind of love and fascination with history, and not just to walk away with facts, and to begin questioning and understanding history and its importance and the impact it has made on all of our lives. I wanted them to be engaged. Exploring history and its interpretation evolves, but I found that our discussions in the classroom come back to two big themes or two questions. One is change affects change, and the other one is, would you have had the courage? Having students examine actions and events and their impacts develops questioning, reasoning, and thinking. Studying history is the perfect place for this to develop these skills in an education system that is so test-driven. Just when did your family arrive in Texas, and why did they come, is a question I posed to my students at the beginning of the year. The research on their family continues throughout the first semester, so they have time to see family, ask questions, and dig up information as they gather with families during the holidays. We have frequent check-ins and sharing. Tell me one interesting person or fact. Tell me a story that you've discovered. Throughout our study of Texas history, I give them a little teaser and tell them a little bit about my family. My family first arrived in Texas in 1831 from Ireland via Middle Tennessee. Hugh and Lucy Kerr abandoned their comfortable home to seek a competency for their 9 children in the New West. They landed at Harrisburg on the Buffalo Bayou on April 21st, 1831. As soon as they could procure a conveyance, they proceeded up the country, intending to settle in Robertson's colony. Major Robertson and the Mexican government were having difficulties, which prevented them from settling there. The next fall, they purchased land in the western part of what is now Washington County, near Burton, where they made their permanent home. An historical marker is placed on the site of the Union Hill, where Lucy Kerr gave acreage for the Methodist Church, and soon the Masonic Lodge and the school were located on this land too. According to family information, the stronger ones went to fight the invading foe, and the weaker ones fled for safety reasons to eastern Texas. The family I have the most documentation on has the strongest connection to the Texas Revolution. In 1832, my great-great-grandfather, David Ayers, made his first visit to Texas. He came to make arrangements for a stone house to be built in Austin's colony in Clokey's neighborhood, near where Long Point in Washington County is today. The Ayers returned with his family on June 10, 1834. He came carrying Bibles from the New York Bible Society. David, Ann, and 6 children boarded the brig, the Asia, from New York, bound for Texas. The boat was shipwrecked twice, sprung a leak, and then ended up shipwrecked again on St. Joseph's Island near Port Aransas. Using small boats and waiting, all 101 passengers made it to land safely. They were marooned there and eventually made their way to San Patricio. In San Patricio, they were able to procure a small cabin, which was made of poles and covered with grass without a floor. After his family was provided for, David Ayers returned to the scene of the shipwreck, only to discover that thieves had opened all of their boxes and taken most of their belongings, even their clothes. But he was able to salvage those boxes of Bibles and the Sunday school books. So, they remained there for 6 months because 3 of the children were seriously ill before moving to the stone house. While he was there, he began handing out the Bibles, and the Catholic priest there became a little concerned and worried, and basically he was run out. They loaded up on the ox wagon and headed for the stone house using the last dollars that he had. I asked my kids, would you have had the courage to leave the comforts of your home, to take this adventure to a place that was as unsettled as Texas? Lose your family possessions, fear for your life because you passed out a Bible or two, and still proceed to a new area. Now I have come to tell you, now I have to tell you how I'm able to share with you this information. You see, we study about our families, and I ask the question, tell me someone that you've learned about, someone interesting, maybe someone ordinary. And this kid says, well, I'm related to David Ayers. And I said, you can't be related to David Ayers. I'm related to David Ayers, and I don't even know you. And so he said, no. I said, prove it. He goes, well, my mom gave me this white notebook that has all the information about my family. You see, I knew about David Ayers from my Texas history book. Travis's son, Charles, stayed with Ayers while he was at the Alamo. I knew of Travis's letter to him from the Alamo, but now I had copies of letters and diaries and information, things that made Texas's history personal. Over the years, students have made connection with their heritage and made collections of family stories. Their sharing helped me make history personal for my students. I've acquired family diaries, stories, and books to share. I also bring in books such as Texas Tears and Texas Sunshine, Echoes from Women of the Alamo, I'll Gather My Geese, and Early Settlers and Indian Fighters from the Southwest, which I share. There's so much more now on the internet. When I started doing this 15 years ago, that you can just type in a topic and pull up information. It just has opened up, just so much. As we continue, as we study the settlement of Texas before and after the Texas Revolution, I try to focus on the personal sacrifices and hardships, the courage of ordinary people, and relate it to more recent history and current events. People and events today are not so different. It is important to me to have students realize that life happens and that it is how you handle it that matters. It is what history has to teach us that has helped us to make better choices and decisions. I am fortunate to be able to trace my family's history, and to even more fortunate that there are stories to share. The account of the runaway scrape, one account I have of the runaway scrape, is a letter an aunt wrote to a niece who needed it for a class assignment. The assignment required that the information be obtained from a person who had experienced the event. This was part of the account. After hearing of the fall of the Alamo, all families west of the Brazos began leaving their homes. We heard the news one evening and packed and left the next morning, taking provisions that were on hand. Clothing, bedding, and the Bibles were placed in the wagon drawn by 2 yokes of oxen. The only males that we had to depend on were your grandfather, who had never driven a yoke of oxen, and your Uncle Frank, who was 9 years old. We left everything else behind. We traveled 2 miles when your grandfather was taken with a chill. A bed was made for him in the wagon, but Ma was equal to the emergency. Ma and Frank led the oxen 18 miles. The next day, Pa was well enough to be able to drive the wagon. We reached Washington before dark, 30 miles from home. We had to wait several days for our turn to come to cross the river. So many had reached there ahead of us. The letter goes on to describe the weeks of travel. It talks about camping at Widow McCurley's on Spring Creek, a woman named Mrs. McMahon. And Mrs. McMahon had knowledge somehow, they picked her up along the way, and she had knowledge of what had occurred and what was going to occur as far as military events. One day the group stopped early to camp, and Mrs. Mann told them that Sam Houston would be camping across the creek that night. An incident occurred with some oxen and members of the Texan Army. And then I go back and I share other excerpts. I have an excerpt from my grandfather that was written in 1843, David Ayers, to a friend that appears in the History of Texas, Methodism in Texas. And I have an article written by one of David's daughters, Caroline Ayers, that appeared in the Austin County Times in 1883. I share these 3 events and these 3 writings, and I have the kids compare the different memories or different perspectives that these 3 people have of the same event. I then pull out excerpts from Marquise James, The Raven, published in 1929, and I have them compare the information. In The Raven, it mentions several events: camping at Mrs. McCurley's, a lady named Mrs. McMahon, and the retrieval of these yoke of oxen. This encourages students to look at more than one source to validate information. We're able to read about the impact the weather played on the Revolution and gain perspective of people who experienced the runaway scrape. We also look at an excerpt from DeLu Rose Harris from Texas Sunshine and Texas Tears and compare her runaway scrape experience to what we've read. The students gain a perspective of the hardships and what it took to be here in Texas at that time. I bring the events of the runaway scrape back to the two big themes: change affects change, and would you have the courage? It is important to visit museums and historical sites, such as the Bob Bullock, Elizabeth Ney, Missions, Forts, and the Capitol. Every city, and especially in this part of Texas, has something that's focused back to the Texas Revolution and Texas history. At the Capitol, my students will recognize many of the paintings we have studied. Online at the Texas State Library and Archives Commission, you can find the McArdle notebooks, the paintings, and students are surprised how much research McArdle did to do these paintings. We analyze why research is important and discuss whether the paintings are accurate portrayals of Texas history. By the time we tour the Capitol and view the paintings, the students already have a personal connection to the work. Then there is the portrait of Sam Houston in the Senate chambers. I always have the students take a look at it because he's holding a hat that was given to him in Galveston by my great-great-grandfather, David Ayers. Of course, there are statues of Austin and Houston done by Ney at the World's Fair, and studying Elizabeth Ney, who was an individualist who preferred sleeping on a cot on our rooftop of her studio, and the process that she went about to sculpt these and other pieces allows for my students to have a personal connection to the work. We are fortunate to have in Texas so many well-maintained historical sites. When visiting the Mission San Jose, students are able to imagine the daily life of those who lived in and around the mission and personally view the ornate crafted rose window, nicknamed Rosa's Window. It is made more personal after reading the story about Pedro Huizar, who built it around 1775 as a memorial to his tragic sweetheart Rosa. Another fascinating place for me is cemeteries. I've always had this sort of eerie, weird fascination with reading headstones, and it's taken me to where to many a place. There are a record of the past and can bring out a tremendous amount of learning. One of the most fascinating spring breaks I took was after discovering the White Notebook of Family Information. We traveled around Central Texas and to Galveston on what my sister, father, and I called the search for the missing dead. We gained historical perspective and established a timeline, and it took us on many different turns in discovering more about Texas history. The State Cemetery in Austin holds the names of many characters. I take my class there to discover people of the past. They have a scavenger hunt looking for people from different time periods, try to locate many governors of Texas, figure out who the figure is in this wrought iron building, and why there's a plaster statue on a coffin within it. They read epitaphs and record the ones that make them think, like Frank Irwin's, fame is a vapor, character endures. We then return with a list of names like Three-Legged Willie, Ben McCullough, Rufus Campbell, and research what part they played in Texas history. They then nominate one person and for the Texas Wall of Fame. I try to do a today in history, Texas history fact each day and tie it in. Like today in Texas history, April 19th, 1882, the last Indian raid in Frio Canyon occurred, which is near Leakey, Texas. I read him an account from early settlers and Indian fighters from the Southwest. It is a story of the death of Allen Lease and Kate McLaurin. It is on an ordinary day. Her husband, John, had left to go down to Cherry Creek below the settlement of Leakey. After eating, Miss McLaurin took Maud, age 6, Alonzo, age 3, and baby Frank to the garden to work. While in the garden, they heard noises from the house. Thinking it was wild hogs, she sent Allen back to scare them off. Instead, he saw Indians pillaging the house. He turned to run, but it was too late. He was shot in the back of the head, killed. Mrs. McLaurin told Ma to run and get the children over the garden fence. As they ran, Mrs. McLaurin was shot many times, but still managed to hang on to the baby and hand the baby to Maud before collapsing. The Indians chose not to pursue, but instead went back to the house. Maud saw her mother lying on the ground, moaning. Thinking her mother would be more comfortable with her pillow, she walked into the house past the Indians, grabbed the mother's pillow, and returned to place it under her mother's head. She then left to go up to the nearest neighbor's house and get help. Her mother managed to hang on until they returned and then died. The Indians were apprehended and captured. Mrs. McLaurin is my great-great-grandmother. These are questions I ask my students. Would you have had the courage to get that pillow? And why was she not seen? Could this really have happened? Or was it just something that was made up to make the story good? My Maud was, what hardships do these people settling Texas face? And how does this compare to the challenge you face now? To teach a topic such as history, you must have a love and a desire for finding out information, ways to tie the information to your students to make it meaningful and important, a connection back to the present. That's where the theme Change Affects Change plays an important part. The land office right now is still out there, was selling a CD. I'm going to purchase it on the way out, but it is This Day in Texas History, and it has a little story that goes with several days. I start with the regions, rivers, and aquifers, and move through a timeline of Texas history. A timeline wraps around the top of my room, and one of the first things we add is, when did you arrive in Texas? So my kids become part of Texas history. We look at Texas history starting with Native Americans. We look at the regions a particular culture lived, their clothing, their shelter, their lifestyle. I challenge each kid to become an expert on just one Native American culture. They then examine what impact the region had on the culture and what impact the culture may have had on that region. We move Texas through time with the coming of the French and Spanish explorers and the change that they brought. We then move Texas through the missions and the impact that they had on the Native Americans. The settlement of Texas under Spain and Mexico, and all the events leading up to the Texas Revolution. What changes did the different laws affect? What was the thinking of both of the settlers and the Mexican government? Change affecting change. I try to have students look at information from different perspectives. The Davy Crockett myth and the De La Pena diary always have my students thinking. I rarely make it through to present-day Texas. There's something that draws people to love this state and its colorful, fascinating history. The search for new information and attending symposiums like this always help me facilitate separating the Texas legend in the search for a more ordinary truth. So I stand before you, an ordinary Texan, proud of our state and its rich history, and I ask myself, why am I here today to talk about Texas history? I'm in a room full of experts. It is all the information and the digging and the questioning you do that helps me continue to make those connections. History books are one-dimensional. We must make history personal to get children thinking, questioning, and wondering. And I leave you with a quote by Oliver Wendell Holmes. Three-story intellect. There are one-story intellects, two-story intellects, and three-story intellects with skylights. All fact collectors who have no aim beyond their facts are one-story men. Two-story men compare, reason, generalize, using the labors of the fact collectors, as well as their own. Three-story men idolize, imagine, predict. Best illumination comes from above, through the skylight. Texas history provides students the opportunity to create their own skylight.
We have time for several questions, and there are a lot of school teachers out there, as well as people who are interested in what's going on in schools today as people try to teach to the test at the same time they're teaching the kids. Sometimes those are not easy to do at the same time. And so if you have any questions, yes, sir.
Betsy, what do you and your fellow teachers need to enhance your teaching capabilities?
The question is, what do Betsy and her fellow teachers need? And I guess you could expand that from whatever source in order to do the best job of teaching history.
You know, one of the things is that the teachers that have come here today are already those that are interested in Texas history. And I think it's so important not just to be a fourth grade teacher who can teach writing and pass the tax test. I figured out that trick, and my kids can do that. But it's how do you teach kids to think, and how do you get them to gain perspective and question? Because history, as it's written in books, many times is not what is really the truth. And especially when you get a Texas history book that just summarizes. I don't want kids just to come out with just, well, we were at the Alamo, and then they kind of know about San Jacinto maybe, but, by fourth grade, what's in there is just, it's a very short couple of chapters in a book. It's finding out and digging up, special diaries, and getting copies of them. Online now, like I said, 15 years ago, it wasn't like this. I mean, I can type in the last Indian raid or type in the date, and it came up with the last Indian raid in Leakey, Texas online. I mean, you can find out about the San Jacinto battlefield, and, and the portal has a great site, information on the Battle of San Jacinto that's more accurate. And so it's getting teachers the information, the websites, and just things like that help make it real. I think that moving away from a textbook and I don't care, I shouldn't, because I'm sure the TEKs do not tell me to do this, but I don't care if they cover the whole span of Texas history. We may, if a kid takes off on one certain topic, we may stay on that person or that area of time for 2 or 3 weeks till they're tired of looking at it or they've discovered the facts. It's getting them on the computer, being able to access information and sites that allows them to discover and have this love of history, and taking the time when they say, oh, I found this, going, oh, wow, because I'm not a Texas history expert, and my kids realize soon on that I make hundreds of mistakes every day, and that that's just who I am, and that none of us are perfectionists, and none of us are perfect, and none of us know it all. But if we go and look and dig, we will find something that will help us answer and solve a problem. So what she's done right there, which is perfect lead into her, and at that site is just amazing. I mean, the internet has opened up so much. I think we should start a Texas Wikipedia.
A Texas Wikipedia?
Yeah, for Texas history.
That's not bad. Yes, sir.
I think what I'm doing is rephrasing his question. How can we, as just regular citizens of the community, assist you?
Well, by coming in and speaking. If you have a special interest, a certain area, because you're so spread out. I mean, how much, like for instance, this is just one time span, the Texas Revolution that we've been looking at and speaking to here. But if there are people within the community going out to schools and talking to them about Texas history, bringing in your own personal history. I mean, as I do my family study, I've gotten so many personal family diaries of people landing from Germany, what they left there, what they arrived to here, and able to share those with kids, I think helps them understand and have a personal connection. And so one of the best things you can do is be a resource.
Are there any other questions or perhaps suggestions about? Yes, sir, right over here.
Uh-huh. I don't think so. I mean, they could be. I haven't done a lot of research on Mrs. McMahon. There was her husband, but that was with them too. But she seemed to be the more dominant of the two.
Do you recall if her first name was Pamela or Pamelia?
I don't.
Okay, I think that's the one you're speaking about, right? Is the infamous Pamela Mann?
Well, and this could be, I'm not sure about that part. The part I read about was with the oxen. And what happened is that she had these oxen, and the Army came back to get, several Army members of the Texas Army came back to get it, and she took a horsewhip after them. And still ended up with those.
Yeah, I think this is the same story and the same person. What puts it into the strategic part of the Texas Revolution is that she claimed that Sam Houston, I believe, told her he was taking those oxen to Nacogdoches, and when she saw him turn the other direction, she decided it was time to get the oxen back, and she took them. And when the soldier, you'll have to remind me of his name, went after Conrad Rohrer, went after her and the oxen to get them back for the Army, she whipped at least that part of the Army that had been sent out to get them, and he came back somewhat worse for wear. That's right. I was about to ask if any of the working teachers out there have any suggestions of projects or topics that have worked well for them. Yes, right here. Yes. If you could, I would really appreciate it if you all, if you want to ask a question, can get to the microphone, because we're going to lose it if it's a long question. Oh, she's running. I really appreciate that. Again, everybody, if you want to ask a question, if you could get to the mic, it really would help the people who are producing this. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I'm very interested in your how you do it, because we are on such a curriculum schedule at our district, and yes, we have to teach to the test, and the test is not, we don't even know what's on the test, okay? But we don't know what's on the test. We have some TEKs that we go by, and we're not allowed to, we're having a real hard time making it interesting to 7th grade because we can't add all this stuff. And second of all, can we get your email address, because we do the state capitol and all that stuff, and I would really like to go to the cemetery if you have like a lesson plan on how to do that.
Sure. I'll be happy to do that.
Okay.
Part of the problem is that, and I know that the TEKs and time are a crunch.
Yes.
By having an outline around the room, you're able to put up the main facts, and you're able to put the what I call the highlights, or that they would be that you would anticipate being on a test. But the kids then see Texas and get a whole picture of its time. The other part is that if you're doing that, then you really have time to sit down and delve in one area. Your whole class doesn't have to be studying all of Texas history. Like when we do the Native Americans, I choose three cultures in different regions and divide the class into 3 groups, so that each group becomes an expert on that culture, and then we do a big compare and contrast between the 3. So we don't study all of the native cultures, but we're able to really dig into depth with those particular 3.
So you're doing more hands-on instead
Right.
of, okay, I understand.
Because if you have an outline going around the room and you hit it as you go around and you put things up, then they see that, and you refer back to it over the semester. But most history tests deal with a lot of facts, probably more likely than, and the facts are more general than specific, because history changes over time. And if you can get your kids to become an expert in one thing, or as you're studying the Texas Revolution, maybe you have some kids that are looking at particular battles rather than trying to cover it all at one time, and then they present. Then that way you end up with being able, they're getting the thinking, the questioning, the reasoning in, rather than trying to just do a survey of the whole thing.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Have you had any experience introducing the children not to these sort of icon things like the Alamo and the cemeteries and so forth, but let's say a working primitive farming environment, or something that conveyed more of the historical life experiences,
Well, we've gone to like
and
that.
less of these iconic memories.
Right. We've been to like the Pioneer Farms in the Austin area. I'm kind of known as the field trip queen, you know. Which is, I guess, a good thing and a bad thing. But the more you get out and the more they experience and have a look at what's going on hands-on, the better it is. That's why I try to focus a lot in on the ordinary people, you know, and what really happened in their day-to-day life. My great-great-grandfather came from, you know, New York area and was not a farmer. I don't know why he thought that he might be here, but he, you know, became a mercantile owner and whatever else along the way and moved to Galveston to the city. But I think that having them look at what happened, I mean, how many times, you know, did my grandfather start over? He lost everything when he was, you know, when he landed. We came back to a house and everything had been taken from it again, once again. And fortunately, a cow came wandering by that probably belonged to somebody else, and they ended up shooting it, and that's what they ate on, you know. But, you know, that's what, you know, life doesn't just come easy, and I think that's one of the things I want my kids to understand is that you really have to work, and that things don't always go exactly as you plan, and nor will they probably always do that. So that if you have a zest and a zeal and a courage within you, you can start over as many times as you need to become, you know, to do what you need.
One of the things that struck me is that these battlefield recreation people who do that, and of course they get to be in movies a lot, but the thing they said impresses them more than anything is I mean, they have to live in camps, they have to wash their clothes, they have to do all sorts of stuff, and it's just amazing, and it smells different from modern life.
It does.
Yes, are there any more? If you don't go to the mic, your question has to be both short and loud. So if anyone's got a short, loud question, if you don't want to make it to the microphone.
My email address is BETS, everybody now knows, TEX@AOL.com.
That's BETS TEX at AOL.com. And you may inundate her now with emails. My feeling on teaching to the test is that it's sort of like bringing a guy into the hospital and he's got a temperature of, let's say, 91, and you know something's wrong. So you pop him in the oven and bring him up to 98.6, and you say, okay, that's the right answer. And so he's okay. You don't know why his temperature is 98.6. You don't know why it was 91 to start with. You don't know how it works. You don't know how that information came about. You don't know anything beyond the right answer. And the other question, and I'm not going to ask you to answer it, but I would like someone to tell me if they know, is who writes these damn teaks in the first place? And how do they know how to engage people's minds and make them remember things? What Betsy's been talking about is engaging students through their senses, through their multiple senses. I mean, Proust was the guy who realized that you open up a book and smell a smell that you haven't smelled since you were a little kid, and all of a sudden the memories come flooding back. And if you're doing things with your eyes and your ears and your fingers and your nose, even if it's a smelly camp, you learn something. I learned something at the Alamo last month when I tried to drink hot, freshly cooked coffee out of a tin cup.
Ouch.
It burns your bottom lip. A little lesson from a history reenactor for me. I also learned how good rabbit can be when it's cooked out on the grill. He didn't tell me where he caught it, which is probably a good thing. And it wasn't a jackrabbit. There's no reason why we can't start a little early with Dreanna. We're only 10 minutes early, and to be 10 minutes early, thank you so much, Betsy. Dreanna Belden and I have had most of our discussions about my Yankee brother-in-law, who shows up on her portal to Texas history. He was sworn in as a county attorney in Clay County back in the 70s, and as she saw me at one of these history conferences and told me that she had this huge collection of images from early Clay County, and as I was clicking through those 900 and something images, some of whom are Geronimo, when he was up at Fort Sill, and the local photographer from Henrietta went up across the Red River to take pictures of the Indians at Fort Sill, comes back with some remarkable photographs of Geronimo. If you go on to the New York Times book review, not the New York Review of Books, and you search the archive for Henrietta, Texas, you'll find that Larry McMurtry, in his review of the New Encyclopedia of the American West, even talks about some of those pictures that came out of early Clay County. And this is a tiny, large but tiny piece of the wealth of information that Dreanna and her colleagues are putting together. Dreanna at the University of North Texas, through the Portal of Texas History, has already been recognized last year by the American Library Association as one of the emerging leaders in library science in the United States. She is using her imagination and her technical skills and her understanding of the interconnections of history to put together a resource. And I'm not going to pretend to be able to tell you about that resource, and that's why I'm going to turn the lectern over to her right now.
Well, thank you so much. I am so excited to be here, and I really do want to thank the San Jacinto Battle Symposium Committee for honoring me by having me come here today. I really do appreciate it. I just embrace every opportunity that I have to talk about the Portal of Texas history and to share with people the really exciting things that we're doing up at UNT. I love this image. This is from one of our partners, the Star of the Republic Museum at Washington on the Brazos. And this is a print from a William Hubble portrait of the surrender of Santa Anna. And for me, it's one of those crossroads of destiny kind of moments, or maybe we better should say it's the aftermath of the crossroads of destiny. But here we have, Sam Houston accepting Santa Anna's resignation. And this is one of the moments in our state's history, this is one of those seminal moments where, the balance of our state and our country really did kind of hang by, fate of which way things would go. And so images like this are very important. And for us as librarians, we are also facing our own crossroads of destiny. The modern technological age, before lunch, someone asked me, how is the internet impacting libraries? Well, I could sit here all day and all day tomorrow and tell you all about how the internet is impacting libraries. It's significant because it's such a dynamic and volatile environment out there that raises so many challenges and also so many opportunities for those that want to grab them and kind of run with those. And so we're facing this crossroads of destiny for libraries, and OCLC did a research report on college students and how they look for information. And OCLC is a nonprofit organization that does countrywide research on people that use libraries and what their needs are and what their attitudes are. And so they asked these college students, where is the first place that you go when you are looking for information? And 89% of them will tell you they go to the internet, to a search engine. And I know that we all love that box that you go to, you put words in, and magic things happen and great things come out, and it's really exciting. And we all know that you do find a lot of great things that way, and then you also find a lot of things that are chaff and things that maybe aren't so great, and we just have to hope that these college students have the information literacy skills to really understand the difference between those things that are great that they're finding and the things that are not so great. And so libraries then are at this crossroads of destiny where we have these opportunities that we can seize. And Roy Tennant, who's a leader in digital libraries, said he calls this the Copernican revolution of libraries. We have this model in the 20th century where the center of the information universe is the library. It's a building, and people are circling around it, orbiting, and coming for information and wanting to find their answers. And that is the model that we all used to. And so many people in our profession, that's why they came in, and that's how that's how they see us providing information to people. And the reality is, we're now in the 21st century, and the center of that information universe has totally shifted from that building that is over here to a person, a real human being who is sitting at a desk, looking for answers, and they're expecting the world of information to come to them. And so our challenge as librarians is how can we take this great information that we have been the cultural heritage trustees of for so many generations, how do we bring this and put this out so that when students and people that are interested in Texas or any type of lifelong learning, how can they find that information when they're at that box, at that magical box? How can we put that information to them? So at UNT, one of the ways that we thought we could address that challenge is that we started in 2002, and you know, we thought it would be great if we could work and collaborate with different folks around the state to take their historical collections and put those online in a way that was usable and in a format that people could find, because it's all about finding and discovering these types of documents. And so in 2004, we started putting things online, and our collections have grown very significantly. We have our website's totally free. Anybody in the world that has an internet connection can come to our website and search for information. We have over 230,000 digital images online. We have 70 collaborative partners, and our content ranges from old rare books from the 1800s to maps to correspondence and letters, diaries, photographs, thousands and thousands and thousands of photographs from all over Texas. And so in doing that type of thing, you know, we also wanted to serve also the small museums that are in Texas and the smaller libraries that really don't have the staff or the skills to try to do this type of project, because it is a huge undertaking. People think, oh, we'll just scan some things, we'll put them online. Well, it's a lot more difficult than that. It's a lot more complex to do it in a way that is usable and easy for people to find. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about and share some stories with you about some of the collections we have online that tie into this you know, Texas Revolution era and the Battle of San Jacinto, and then also a few of our other collections that we have. One of our first collections that we put up that is perfect for today's event is we were sitting, me and some of my colleagues, some people from UT Arlington, various other places around Texas, and we were early on, back several years ago, talking about how we can move forward in a way across the state to put this information out there for folks. And we were sitting talking, and we thought the perfect thing to do would be to come up with a small grant, kind of show how we can collaborate together and put out a really great product and great information that really comprehensively treats a theme in history. And so we're sitting there in the Texas State Library and Archives Commission building, and we're thinking, what should this theme be? And we're like, hello, what building are we in? We're in the Lorenzo de Zavala State Library building. So we thought that would be a great topic because he is such a fascinating character in our state's history, and really is so underrepresented, I think, compared to some of the other patriots of our Texas history. And so, you know, I volunteered to write the grant for it and kind of do the research and pull together the partners to actually do this grant and make it happen. And, you know, he's just a fascinating guy, truly, you know, a Renaissance man of his time. He's a person that started out as a newspaperman, and then in his youth, he was a staunch Federalist and had very firm political beliefs and ideals, and was actually imprisoned for his political beliefs, spent 3 years in jail in Mexico. And during that time, he didn't waste it. He studied medicine and learned enough that he was qualified to be a doctor. And then he went on to become very active in Mexican politics, and very skilled, a very savvy person, astute, a skilled politician. And then, you know, he's at that time, of course, very active with the other Federalists and is corresponding with them and interacting with them. And then because of his skills and his wide background and knowledge, the languages that he knows, Mexico chose him to go over to Paris as their minister and delegate for Mexico. Well, while he's there, that's the time that Santa Anna comes along and rejects the 1824 Constitution. And this didn't set well with Lorenzo de Zavala at all. So that's when he made his decision to come back to Texas and to go ahead and fight on the sides of the Texans. So basically what we ended up with is, with all of our partners, we worked with a number of museums and libraries. We have over 1,100 digital images online that very comprehensively, all the materials we could find about Lorenzo de Zavala. If he was writing to someone, if someone was writing to him, if they were talking about him, we wanted to include it. And these are images that are from the San Jacinto Museum of History. And I have a portrait here of Lorenzo de Zavala and a rocking chair that belonged to him. And in that collection, we also have extensive correspondence. We have over 220 letters. And this is just a partial list of who some of these correspondents were. And it's just a really powerful way of looking at who the actors and people were in that time period. These are letters from the 1820s up to the 1830s. And so this is a letter from Santa Anna to de Zavala. They did correspond with each other quite frequently. And the great thing about our site is this letter, when you pull it up online, all of our objects have a little magnifying glass. So you can click on that magnifying glass, and it's going to blow this letter up to bigger than life size, so you can see the paper, you can look at these stains and really get a good feel for what type of document this was. And you know, with Betsy up here talking about her students, how much more powerful is that? I mean, you read it in a textbook, but if you can look at a document like this in the classroom, it kind of really brings home to you the issues and the things that were going on that day. And another great thing that I love about this collection that I thought was a lot of fun is we have a lot of great receipts and documents that kind of show the personal life of De Zavala. So this is, for instance, from his time in Paris. It's a receipt for champagne that he was purchasing and the parties that he threw. There's quite a number of receipts, actually, for alcohol purchases. So I think he's a guy that liked to have fun. But you know, it's really interesting, and there's an invitation in there for the Masons that were in Paris inviting him to one of their events. And also the Paris imprint of one of his books that he published, because he, you know, wrote and authored a number of books in his life. So there's the receipt for the book that he paid to have published in Paris that's also in there. But it's a really great collection, and I think it's had a lot of impact for historians. We figured out, you know, Margaret Swett Henson wrote a great book about Lorenzo de Zavala, but we figured out if a historian wanted to re-examine all these issues, if they wanted to go to each of these 10 institutions to look at these documents, they would have to travel 2,400 miles to go and visit and spend time at all these different places. But now it's all online, and as Jim said, they could be home in their pajamas and see these things. Another collection that we put up early on that people have really responded to is Gamel's Laws of Texas. And I don't know who in the audience knows much about H.P. Gamel, but I just want to share briefly with you some information about him, because he is another one of those unsung heroes of Texas. He was a Danish immigrant that came to Texas with his brother and his wife and child, and you know, lived in Austin. He was just, you know, typical immigrant trying to scrape by, trying to make a living. And so he lived with his wife, and he was known as the 10-cent bookman in Austin. He would sell used books from his home, jewelry, stationery, whatever he could, to get by. And then, you know, he had his own crossroads of destiny. And that is, in 1881, the Texas State Capitol burned. And to raise extra money for his family, he decided to take the contract to clear out the debris from the Texas State Capitol. And you know, the shell of the building was still there, but there was all this muck in there and this mess and all these wet things. And so he took the contract to do that work. And so as he's moving these things out of the Texas State Capitol, he's finding stacks and stacks of documents. And they're damp and they're wet, and they may be singed a little bit, but they're basically intact. And he's like, hey, you know, I'm finding all these great papers. What should I do with this? Oh, just throw them out. You know, just take it all away, haul it away. Well, he didn't, and that has made such a difference for us, and I'm sure for many historians would agree in our history, because what he did is he took all these things back to his house. And I don't think Mrs. Gamel was too happy about this, but he actually strung lines around his yard and hung up documents to dry out. You can imagine, I'm sure, and eventually she did help him, so she kind of got on board with that. But basically, it took him, I think, 17 or 19 years for him to assemble these and make logical order out of them. But he then, in 1898, published the first 10 volumes of Gamel's Laws of Texas. And what he had saved and what he had done for us by not throwing these documents away is all these legal documents that are from the Spanish colonial period of Texas's history and the Mexican period of Texas's history and you know, the early republic. He had saved all these documents that are such a core piece of who we are as a state. So he really is a hero of Texas history. But we've had those all online at UNT, and the thing about the books that we put online is they are all fully word searchable. So if you're looking for a specific page, one of the problems always with Gamel's is there was a pretty crummy index that you know, a book that was published that wasn't that great. Well, now you can actually search through these and go exactly to the page you're looking for information on. We've gone through to digitize the remaining volumes of this, and we have over 45,000 pages just of Gamel's Laws of Texas online. And one of the great projects we're looking at this year is we're going to be digitizing the earliest session laws of the Republic of Texas. I think 6 out of the first 9 sessions we'll be publishing, digitizing and putting those online. And so this is why I think digital libraries are so powerful, because you can, the more information that you put in there, the greater the results that you can get. I mean, this to me, just looking at this picture at a quick glance, this is the great beginnings of a book report for a student in 4th grade or 7th grade. They have all these images to work with. We have books about his life, so they can look through those. We've got his some of his correspondence and his letters. So I mean, and these are from all sorts of different places. So you can really draw these things together in a way that people can use them in a way that they couldn't before. And so we have this side of the Texas Revolution and the Battle of San Jacinto, and the other side is Santa Anna. And so here we have various portraits of him from different books. There's a lot of correspondence we have to and from Santa Anna that's on the portal. And this is a print here of the Battle of Buena Vista, General Taylor and Santa Anna engaging. Here's a mortgage bond that says that Santa Anna is to pay the bearer $500 for some things that he bought. This is from 1868. And here's a Mexico and a military chieftain, so a book that has got a pretty good biographical story about him. And also the great thing is you get many different views of history, so you can really start to analyze and look at these differently. So we have 3 different views of a map of the Battle of San Jacinto here from different sources. So a historian can come look at these, and these are also very different. I'm certainly not qualified to analyze these and say which is more historically accurate, but it's really interesting that they're so different in their portrayal of what that battleground looked like. And then one of our great partners is the Star of the Republic Museum. They received a grant a couple years ago to digitize part of their collections. And they were so efficient about this and did such a great job, they digitized everything in their collection, 15,000 artifacts and documents that they had. And so we have the first batch up on the portal now. It's over 3,000 digital images of their artifacts from that Republic period. And they did a fantastic job of photographing these and presenting them online. And so this is a cane engraved San Jacinto, 21st April, 1836, from B.H. Davis. It was owned by James Billingsley. And here's an Austin militia officer's coat with gold buttons. I mean, this is something that somebody probably actually wore, during that time period. And here's, again, a hand-painted illustration of Santa Anna on horseback. And an 1836 copy of the Treaty of Velasco that they have there in their museum. And so I want to kind of briefly go, we've got hundreds of books in the portal, we really do. We are digitizing books from our Texana collections, but we're also partners with Dallas Public Library, the Austin Public Library, and the Austin History Center. Believe it or not, the Star of the Republic Museum had quite a little library of books that are cataloged nowhere in the world. We digitized one of their books that's so rare that the only other existing copy that shows up in the world catalog is at Yale University. So there's some really great things that we have online, but I want to touch on just a few of those that pertain to this period of Texas history. So we have History of the Revolution by Reverend C. Newell, Evacuation of Texas by Vicente Filasola, and also his Memories of the War that he published in 1848, so I hope you know Spanish. So. And then German. We did a great project with UT Arlington. This is one of their books. And earlier this year, we did a project with them on German immigration to Texas. So they basically took the books in their collection and the memorabilia and the artifacts in their collection that dealt with German immigration to Texas. And there's a lot of materials there that are in German, a lot in English. So that's a really great collection, and that was part of that project that we did with them. And this is the person that wrote this is his account of his participation in the Goliad Massacre and other things to do with the Texas Revolution. Mexico and her military chieftains, great biography of Santa Anna in there. Biography of Private Alfonso Steele, so a survivor of the Battle of San Jacinto, talking about his experiences. True Veterans of Texas, what really happened, list of the survivors type of thing. And then this, how important is this for a school child to see this? The letter from Santa Anna ordering the retreat from the Mexican army the day after the battle. This is the actual letter he wrote. So, it kind of really brings it home to you that this was something that he was touching that day that he wrote, and that it was a big part of our state's history. And this one also, this never came to pass, but I always kind of was touched by this letter from Lorenzo de Zavala to his son. After the Battle of San Jacinto, he and Santa Anna years ago had been allies and, political allies in Mexico. But he said, it has finally done. And I've agreed to leave for Veracruz with General Santa Anna, and it's the best service that I can do for Texas. But basically he says that anything that takes me away from my wife and children just embitters his existence. So he wasn't happy about this idea that he was going to be escorting Santa Anna back to Mexico. Of course, that didn't happen, but at this point in time in his life, before he was to shortly die, unfortunately, that was what he was facing, and this was his thoughts on it. And this is a battle flag said to have been captured from Santa Anna at San Jacinto. And what's always funny about this, I'm really closely tied to the museum groups here in Texas, and about a month and a half ago I was at the Texas Association of Museums. And in one of the sessions we were in, somebody was talking about how is it so funny that when you have artifacts up in your museum, you had a little placard there, but people sort of read those and selectively remember what they want, because this particular museum had a bed that was alleged that General Robert E. Lee had slept in it. And so, years later, you get people coming back and they say, hey, where's that bed that General Lee slept in? It's like, no, it's alleged. So this is alleged to have been captured from Santa Ana at San Jacinto, but you guys might remember, oh, I heard that interesting session where they had that flag that was captured from Santa Ana at San Jacinto. Here's some silver spoons that were found on the battlefield after the fight. They look like they saw some rough action there themselves. And then we also have photographs of the survivors of the Battle of San Jacinto. Here's George Petty, Elsie Clemens, and Moses Bryan. This is from the Star of the Republic Museum. And here's an 1880 photograph from other survivors of the Battle of San Jacinto. There's just a few people identified in this picture. But one of the great things about our website, something that's interesting that's been happening since we've been putting content online, is that we do, in our record view of items, have a comment on this item. And of course, I doubt there's few people alive that would remember who these folks are, but we get so many comments from people sending us notes correcting things because they're an expert, or that's their great-great-grandfather, and they recognize them and say, oh, this is so-and-so, and here's the years they lived. An example of that is recently, we have a photo of cavalry about circa 1900 near Laredo, and they have their pistols pulled. And so one of the comments we get is from a guy who's, blah, 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 at pentagon.mil. So I figured this guy knows what he's talking about. And he said, well, you might want to change your date, because you should say really circa 1911, because that particular pistol, the blah, 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 was adopted by the U.S. Army in 1911. So, you get great people sending you comments like that where you can update your records and get more accurate information about what's really going on. And we get quite a number of people that are identified in photographs that way as well. And another reason we started the portal was we really wanted to put these resources out there for teachers and for educators, because they need some help, and as part of their mission that they are charged with using primary sources in the classroom. And so, kind of in honor of the fact that I'm here in the Battle of San Jacinto Symposium, we, about a month ago, uploaded a new lesson plan, which is a lesson plan about the Battle of San Jacinto. We call these types of lesson plans our primary source adventures, and we've been doing these for quite a while. We have about maybe 25 of these online on different topics of Texas history. But basically what you have is you have lesson plans for 4th and 7th grade, and teachers can open those up, and they're tied directly to the TEKS. They know exactly what TEKS they're addressing. There's a PowerPoint slideshow that they can open in their classroom, and it's embedded with text for the kids to read. Great images that really kind of bring home the lessons of that particular event in history. And then there's also a printable version in case they don't have great AV equipment in their classrooms. And also then worksheets for them to kind of assess what they've learned and go on. And then also we'll have an introduction there that will talk about the sources, the particular sources that were used for that lesson plan. Are they biased? Is there much critical argument about the significance of these documents? That kind of talk about that so the teacher understands how to approach that with those documents. And then links to, great handbook of Texas articles, things that we have existing in the portal, so just other resources that they can look at on this same thing. And so the ones that we have are like comparing the Wichita and Comanche Indians from historical perspectives of the time and contrasting those. As modern as the CCC during the Great Depression, the great work they did in Texas, and what it was like to work in the CCC using oral history. So there's just a lot of great lesson plans here, and these are used a lot. Thousands of teachers, thousands and thousands have used these and love using these. And now I'm going to have to embarrass one of my friends here in the audience, Jennifer Casey. Who is also a 7th grade history teacher, was one of my collaborators on this project, which is another style of our lesson plans. Jennifer, can you stand up for just one second? She's a master Texas history teacher for 7th grade. She's really wonderful, brilliant, and I worked with her and a team of 4 other teachers. My primary source adventures are developed by a PhD history student that works with me. But this particular lesson plan was developed by teachers, for teachers, and these have been extremely popular. And some of the ones that we have that kind of touch in on our topic today is the law of April 6, 1830, my Texas History Notebook, the Texas Declaration of Independence. And these are all, like Jim was saying, built around the senses, having the kids actually sometimes physically get up, have debates, act things out. What's it like to be in the day of a life of a Spanish mission? So they had the kids act out the different roles that Native Americans would have to fulfill in their time that they were there. Causes of the Texas Revolution, a Mexican Texas Talk It Out, both sides. What are the issues? What brought us to this point? And also comparing the American and the Texas revolutions, a really key thing for teachers in 7th grade who are preparing their students for U.S. history in 8th grade. And those have been extremely, extremely popular. We just put them up in August, and thousands of times that they've been used. Just incredible. And I just kind of want to briefly go through to give you kind of an idea of the other types of materials we have. These are some of our newer collections we have online. Childress County Heritage Museum, a lot of great photographs and history from their area. This is the Clay County Historical Collection, one of those Native American pictures. This one by E.E. Quick. The Corpus Christi Museum of Science and History, they had a great collection of pictures of the hurricane of 1919. So we have digitized all those and put those online. And it really just shows the devastation and how vulnerable our coastal areas can be. The Museum of the American Railroad, we have about 400 pictures of trains online. And a number of them are in Texas, but they are also from around the entire U.S. So these are a pretty interesting collection. One of the great collections we've been working with is with the Austin History Center. And this is a collection that was from the photojournalist Neil Douglas, who was a contributor to the Austin American Statesman. And they have 50,000 negatives of his career from the 1930s to the 1950s. And he basically photographed anybody important who came to Austin, Texas. Any president that came to Austin, all the governors, all the major politicians. And so this is a picture of Harry Truman's whistle stop. There's a really young LBJ over here to his left shoulder. And so we've put about 2,000 of these online, and we are looking for funding to continue that project because there's so many great photographs in this collection. This is kind of one of those success stories with some of the really smaller institutions that we work with. The Boyce Ditto Public Library is in Mineral Wells, Texas. And we're very flexible with how we work with partners. Sometimes we do the entire work, we digitize, put it online. Well, they have a troop of volunteers that have digitized their local history collection, and they have probably 3,000 images online. And of course, Mineral Wells was a huge resort area in the 30s and 40s, so you get pictures like Judy Garland and celebrities that were visiting the area. And then also, they had this fantastic collection from a guy who was the last vice commander of the U.S. Army helicopter facility there at Fort Walters. When they were closing the base down in the late 60s, they were going to throw out this huge collection of photographs and history that documented this base, and he took it, and he is about 90 years old now, but he compiled these into volumes, and one might be on the officers of the base, the Officers' Wives Club, and there's a whole book that is on foreign service pilots, because in addition to the U.S. Army helicopter pilots, they trained these guys from all over the world. So I have had emails from retired generals in Pakistan who are thrilled because they have found their picture from when they were at Fort Walters back in the 60s. And I've heard from people in, just from all over the world. It's incredible. And here's a picture. We're big partners with Palestine Public Library and the Anderson County Historical Commission. This is the Freedmen's first vote in Anderson County. Another great collection that we took in that is modern day, these are all contemporary for 2006, is Jose El Castillo. And he is a North Texas news correspondent for FA News Service, which is the largest Spanish language news service in the world. And so basically, he donated to us his photographs from the past couple years, 3,000 photographs, which include all sorts of notable Hispanics and Latinos that came to North Texas during the time that he was taking these images and reporting on it. But also in 2006, all the immigrant protesting marches that were going on, hundreds of pictures of that event. And we think, oh, that's it just happened 2 years ago. But things that are happening today are history, and so it's great to be able to capture those now while we still have him to talk to and get more information about who these people are and what was happening at that time. And we also have lots of maps online, so I just want to show you some examples of that. Here's a map we have from 1633 of the Western Hemisphere. LaSalle's map of Texas. I think this is from Thrall's Pictorial History of Texas. The new map of Texas by Young from 1836. And we just really have hundreds of maps from our Texana collections. UT Arlington, we're working with them to digitize some of their maps as well. Here's one of their maps this is from Star of the Republic, 1840, General Austin's map of Texas. Here's one of those German maps, 1849, that we did with that UTA project on the German immigration. And I want to show you what the interface is like for that if you go in, what you can expect, because you can zoom in on these maps, zoom in, zoom out, drag them around as if you were in Google Maps. And so basically I want to show you how that zoom function works. It is really great. We did a whole series of the soil survey maps of Texas along with the books that go with those that describe the county history and everything. So you can really zoom in on these, and if you can see right here, this little red box is showing us the area it's highlighting, and you can drop and drag that around to whatever area you want to look at. But basically, you can zoom in and get really great detail on these maps and see the specific things and read them. So it's really wonderful. And then we have lots of correspondence. I think this is part of that Lorenzo de Zavala project, to the political chief of Bear, and letters from Polk to Thomas Rusk from 1846. So just a huge variety of correspondence. We have a big collection of Mary Anson Jones and her letters to her son. I mean, hundreds of them, talking about family history, after her husband's death. And a letter from Sam Houston. A funny thing about this is I think there's a few people out there that think the mysteries have been solved. There's nothing new under the sun to find. Denton Public Library took in a collection from an estate of someone who'd passed away and said, oh, here, take some of our books. And these weren't any kind of special, rare Texas history books, just, books published in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And so they're going through figuring out what they want to keep, what they want to get rid of, what they can accept. And this letter falls out of a book, Sam Houston to Joseph Ellis, hello, 1847. And so then they, of course, went through all the things they had tossed aside to make sure they didn't miss anything else. But so I'm not sure this is a letter that can solve any earth-shattering discoveries. But the fact is there are really fascinating historical materials in places that we don't know about yet. The Sterling Price Camp, United Confederate Veterans of Dallas. The Journey of Cabeza de Vaca online, the whole book. History of the Regulators and Moderators. Barbara Jordan, Governor of Texas. Well, we all know she wasn't Governor of Texas, but this was like a Governor of the Day honor for her. This is a pamphlet from that. The Alamo and other poems. Denton County Brands. One of the classics for people who were coming to Texas, The Guide to Texas Immigrants from 1835. You can now read it online. Thumbnail History of Houston. Indian Wars and Pioneers of Texas. And I also want to talk about newspapers. Has anyone here heard about the Library of Congress and National Endowment for the Humanities new initiative for digitizing newspapers, chronicling America? Has anyone heard of this? A few hands. Well, this is going to be like a great thing for all of us in the next 20 years because it is so exciting. Library of Congress has this new initiative to digitize historic American newspapers from 1836 to 1923. And it's a 20-year plan, and they want to involve all 50 states. And they are selecting in each state one institution to work with, to be their partner to digitize those papers. And I'm really happy to say that UNT was selected as that partner for Texas a few months ago. And we just started in September on this grant. So we are so excited. So every 2 years, we'll be doing another huge batch of Texas newspapers. This particular time period is from 1890 to 1910 was the period that they selected to start with. And the idea being that you select significant newspapers and over time try to do as much a complete run of those as possible. But in addition to that, we're partners in that grant with the Center for American History at UT because they have such a great microfilm vault of Texas newspapers. Also Texas Tech and the Texas State Library and Archives Commission, but we're the lead institution. And those are all going to be hosted on the Chronicling America site, which you can go see right now. They have a picture of newspapers from Virginia, I think Utah, New York, Florida, and Kentucky right now. And Texas and Minnesota and somebody else, some other lucky participant are the second round that have been brought into the grant. But basically, Texas is so huge. It's great. It's like, oh, wonderful. When you get to Connecticut and Rhode Island, we're doing 100,000 pages every 2 years. That's great for them. They may get some sort of comprehensive coverage. But when you're talking about Texas and 100,000 pages every 2 years, that's not even going to come close. So I've also been partnering with foundations and local groups that are raising their own money to do their local newspapers, and we are going to be hosting all of the newspapers that we do in the portal to Texas History and make those available to everyone for free. And one thing I did want to mention, and I've got to knock on wood for this, because I'm 95% sure that I'm going to get this grant that we have out right now. It's a partnership between us and the Center for American History, and it's so historically significant, I don't see how they could turn us down, but it's a project to digitize the earliest Texas newspapers held by the Center for American History. All of the newspapers that they have extant on microfilm or in paper that have not been microfilmed from about 1828 to about the 1845 time period. It's going to be about 13,000 pages of newspapers. So if that is funded, which I'm pretty confident it will be, it's going to be a fantastic project because it involves a several years run of the Texas Telegraph and Register to they have one paper copy of a paper from Brazoria County from 1828, but it's the only one left existing. So we're just going to digitize it and put it online so people can learn. But it's going to be a great resource if that does work out, and I hope that it will. But I want to show you our interface to the newspapers. We did do a pilot project a while back, just 2 years of the Ferris wheel newspaper from Ferris, Texas. And so basically, very similar to our interface for maps. You can zoom in on this. These are word searchable. The powerful thing about this project is these are all, the text has been extracted from them, so you can search and find the page that you're looking for the person or the event that you want. And so basically, you can really zoom in on these maps and see the texture of the paper and get a good look at those and drag and drop around. So I think it's going to be a great project, and we're really excited about that, and it's going to be fantastic. Well, I guess I wanted to close out by saying, what makes it really rewarding for me is that I do know that we're impacting people's lives, because I hear from them every day. And I know we're making a difference, from the mundane to the profound. It's really making a difference in people's lives. One example of that is I know that Jeff Dunn was writing an article a while back that came out 2 years ago, an excellent article about Emily de Zavala West. And in the Portal to Texas History, he came across it over the internet, and he found a document that really helped to bolster his research and the argument he was trying to make in his article, and that makes a difference for historians and lay historians that are doing research. Another example of that is a lady who's a city planner out in Laredo, Texas. She was so excited because she found Gammel's Laws of Texas online, and it solved a problem for her because she was researching something to do with their city ordinances. She had to do this research in Gammel's. She was anticipating a trip to Austin to sit for hours and hours and try to find the particular pages she needed, and she found it right online. She was so thrilled. Just another tons of examples of folks who are finding their family pictures online. And if you've ever been in a library setting or worked with genealogists, you know what avid interest they have in their family history. And I heard just last week from this family, this woman emailed me and said, one of our partners is the Jacob Fontaine Religious Museum in Austin, and they had this great collection of African-American churches in the Austin area. And so there's this picture of this woman in the 50s with her church youth choir. And she's like, that's my mother-in-law who passed away many years ago. We have very few pictures of her, so my family is so excited to see this picture. And her husband even called me on Monday to tell me, he's the son of this woman. He's like, I can't tell you how much this has meant to my family, because my daughters were moved to tears to see this picture of their grandmother serving her community and helping people, and it made a big difference for their family. So thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to talk to you about the Portal to Texas history. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you.
I'm going to exercise my prerogative to ask the first question. One of the books that you have online now is that one by Hermann Ehrenberg that you just showed, called Der Freiheitskampf in Texas, written in German and in the Fraktur print. Is that word searchable?
Sort of.
I was afraid of that.
Yeah, the reality is German fonts, those old German fonts, are really difficult. We have a really high-end program that does OCR on our books, which is optical character recognition. And so on English books, a lot of books, we get really great results where it's pretty close to being mostly accurate. This German book, not so good. I mean, that's just the honest truth. And the answer to that is, over time, our philosophy is over time we capture a super great image from the get-go. So we have master digital images, and as technology improves and those programs improve and more work is done in developing those tools that can, make it an automated process that's very inexpensive, we feel like we'll get better results for books like that, those German fonts, which are problematic.
In case you're, I want to tell you why I was interested in that. Just this is one of these things that comes up. I've been working on Ehrenberg's biography for the past 13 years now. He's a very elusive character. And there are a series of letters written from Sonora and Arizona to San Francisco newspapers, written both in English and in German, by a bilingual person who was familiar with Texas, who was in the mining business, who was at the same place at the same time as Hermann Ehrenberg, and yet he signed all the letters Kino, as in Father Kino, using an icon from Arizona history. So these are the Kino letters. They've never been separately published. They're scattered in mostly the Alta California and the German language newspaper in San Francisco. And some of you may be familiar with Linda Hudson. All of you have probably heard the term manifest destiny. And most of you probably think, until you read Linda's book, that that was a phrase developed by a writer by the name of John L. O'Sullivan. And Linda has pretty well shown, no, it was Jane McManus Casno Storms. I may not have all of her last names in the right order, but the lady from Eagle Pass. And the way she discovered that was simply by doing computer analysis, not anything fancy, but just looking at phrases and how they're used and what the characteristics of one person's prose is compared to the characteristics of the unknown. This is the kind of thing that, you know, they ended up showing who wrote that book about Bill and Hillary Clinton called Anonymous. They outed Joe Klein because of this kind of analysis. And so what's really been difficult for me is to find something word searchable in German so that I can compare this material in both German and English to Hermann to try to pin this guy down, because no one's ever been able to tell who wrote these letters. And I think it's my guy, our guy, Hermann Ehrenberg, who wrote one of the longest and most vivid accounts of the Texas Revolution. But he wrote it in German. And he published it in Leipzig in 1843, 44, and 45, and it's never had a reliable edition in English. And so when I saw that you were putting that up, and then I thought, it's too good to be true, and yes, it was. Fraktur is very, very tough. The first Texan to try to translate Ehrenberg was a man named Bartholomew, who did his master's thesis at the University of Texas at Austin in 1925. And he couldn't read Fraktur. He got the B's and the P's mixed up. He got the F's and the H's mixed up. And if he would just guesstimate sometimes and get some wildly wrong translations. And no, because this was after World War I, perhaps, there were no German professors on his master's thesis board, even though what he was doing for his master's thesis was translating German. Pa Ferguson had a devastating effect on German teachers in Texas, I'm afraid. He fired them all because they were Germans. In any case, some of you may have been inspired to ask a question of Dreanna, and I see some people perhaps lined up at the microphone here. Would you come and ask your questions?
I didn't have a question. I just wanted to say thank you as a 7th grade teacher, because I actually have used the primary sources this year with my students, referring to them as database questions. And I had used them last year and printed them out on cardstock and laminated them. And they just weren't that exciting as black and white copies on the desks. And this year I thought, we have mobile laptop carts at our school. So I checked one out, and it was 2 students to a laptop, and they viewed them as the PDF, so they were actually able to enlarge the slides to look at William Travis's letter. And then it was fun if they could read his handwriting, because cursive is going to the wayside. So then it was, can I decipher this word, and switch to the transcript to verify. And then I was also the hero because it was 7 pages of questions, but since it's in a Word document, I was able to shorten it down to 4. And so then I was the hero for the day on that one. So I thank you. And I thank you over there because I tried out the, sorry, I'm nervous talking to adults. I'll pretend you're all 13. Okay. We tried out the convention from the My Texas History Notebook, and they came in, and I had them in a circle, laid out the, I think, 4 steps of directions, and then sat at my desk and let them go for 45 minutes creating their own declaration. And from the minds of 7th graders, they declared themselves independent from the school district. One class declared themselves independent at the age of 12. They were free of their parents, but only in the state of Texas. And if their parents moved out of Texas, then that freedom went away because they had to move with their parents. And some, I think, had just declared themselves free of random school rules like the dress code. But they knew to think that we didn't want anybody coming to school naked, so all body parts must be covered. But it was interesting to see each class working it out. I made them elect a leader. Some of the leaders were impeached, and new leaders were put into place within 45 minutes. But every time they got stuck, they looked back at me, and I just threw my hands up in the air and made them work it out. So I thank both of you.
If you look at some of the comments back and forth between the governor and the council in 1835 and 36, they weren't much better than that.
And I told the class that when a group of teachers get in a room, it's pretty much the same. You have the people fighting, you have a clique over there that's gossiping the whole time and not paying attention, somebody that's doodling or grading papers or drawing notes. So as adults, we're not always much better than they are trying to get something accomplished. But I thank both of you.
Well, I thank you, and thank you so much for telling me the stories about how you've been successful at using these in your classrooms. And, when we put these lesson plans online, I think other people have done similar things and done research on them, see that teachers will take and use the parts that they want to. And so I applaud you for that, for shortening it to fit into your time frame. And, that's why I put it out there, just for them to use it as they see fit in their classrooms and what works for them. So thank you.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to salute y'all for gathering information together that may otherwise be lost. I know in Texas, I don't think all the historical groups communicate with each other much. At bear.org, I have all the county judges of Bexar County and under my history section. But I got a call from a guy not too long ago who was name was Bill Campbell, and it happened that his great-great-grandfather was Thomas Wigg Grayson, who was the pilot of the steamship called the Yellowstone that ferried Sam Houston and Santa Ana, I believe, to where they signed the Treaty of Velasco, was it? And he had all these papers from him, that had been handed down. But I just wonder how many families, he just happened to have a wife who was very interested in history, but I wondered if there was nobody like his wife, where would those papers go? And I think the more we can get the word out that, give us your papers, or loan us your papers, or if you have something important and you don't know what to do with them, at least let us copy them or something, because these papers will soon go away and nobody will ever see them again. And so I really appreciate your effort to try to capture and consolidate and reflect what has really been our very rich heritage here in Texas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that, I've done something that probably no one else has done in this room, and that's attend a meeting of the Clay County Historical Association. And they were so proud that you all had put their collection online. I mean, it just gave them an enormous sense of pride, and that could be repeated more than 254 times with all those other county seats and other towns around Texas. Yes, sir.
We don't prevent anybody from right-clicking on documents. They're not really downloadable. We don't make it here, press here, and download documents, because really we're just getting rights from people to host their materials online. If they have copyrights on, if an institution holds the rights to their documents, they retain those rights. So, but our items, we do say for copyright, people in the classroom or for private research are free to use those documents. But then if you're looking at commercial use or republishing those in some way, then people would need to contact the institution that holds that document to work out with them what needs to happen with it. So.
The other question I had was about those Republic of Texas newspapers. What's the tentative date for starting or completion of that project?
Well, we'll find out if we receive the grant probably around June or July, and if we do, it'll start in September, and it'll be a year-long project. So
Just a year?
A year-long
That's
project.
great. Yeah, there aren't that many of them, and those will become word searchable too?
Yes.
That's a tremendous resource. I'm going to start writing about the Texas Republic about that time, and I think I'm going to be able to use that. Yes, ma'am.
So he's like, hurry up, hurry up.
My assistant principal asked me to ask this question. He wanted to find out how many men were on skiing at the Battle of St. Jacinto, and where would he find out who they were?
There's actually a publication sponsored by someone who may be here today that has all those muster rolls. I would go first, just off the top of my head, to the book called A Revolution Remembered by Frank de la Teja, which is the translation of Seguin's autobiography, not a translation, but a compilation of Seguin's English language autobiography that he did in San Antonio in the 1850s, and a translation of many of the letters that Seguin wrote, and also includes the muster rolls that Seguin supplied for not only his San Jacinto company, but also those who fought at the Siege of Bayeux in 1835. I think the second edition is published by the Texas State Historical Association, and it's available in paperback from the TSHA. Again, it's A Revolution Remembered, the memoirs and selected correspondence of Juan Nepomuceno Seguin, and edited by Jesus F. de la Teja. Yes, sir.
I'd just like to say I use the Texas Portal a lot, and I was involved in the whole controversy between the Yellow Rose of Texas, Emily West, and...
Get a little closer to the mic if you don't mind.
I was involved in the controversy between Emily West, the Yellow Rose of Texas, and Emily West de Zavala, and proving that they were two separate people, and I don't think we could have done it without the Texas Portal. You know, it was invaluable.
Yes, and I would, I'll choose my words carefully here. Some will know about the inside joke, and some will not, and I'm not about to say anything in public. But if you want to get the best available information on that controversy and the distinction or lack of same between Emily West de Zavala and Emily D. West, sometimes referred to as the Yellow Rose of Texas, then nothing will give you better information than the two articles written by Jeff Dunn and published online in the Compass Rose, which is the publication of special collections at the library at the University of Texas at Arlington. Spring 2005, for the contract between James Morgan and Emily D. West to go from New York City to Mexican Texas to work as a housekeeper for James Morgan. Jeff is the person who found that document more than a decade ago and recognized it for what it was. And then in spring 2006, dealing with this question of whether these two women with very similar names who seem to have come to Texas on the same boat at the same time and both lived within a stone's throw or an arrow's flight from the San Jacinto battleground, whether or not they were really one person or two different people. And Jeff is continuing to work on that, and it's going to be a book someday, Jeff. I'm going to whiplash you until that comes out as a book. Yes, sir.
I'd also like to thank Mr. Crisp and Mr. Dunn for their perseverance and dedication to true history.
Well, thank you. I'll thank you for Jeff, too. I'll tell this crowd, Jeff may blush, but I'll tell this crowd what I told someone yesterday, and that is I don't think anyone knows any more about the Battle of San Jacinto and the surrounding events than Jeffrey Dunn, the founder of this organization. He did blush. Yes, Elizabeth.
Well, I'll have to second that comment, but that wasn't what I came to the microphone for. I just wanted to tell whoever it was over there that was asking about Juan Seguin's unit in the Battle of San Jacinto, there's actually one step closer source. If you go to the Handbook of Texas Online and look at the article about Juan Seguin, it is written by Frank de la Teja. So that's guaranteed.
But it doesn't,
to be accurate.
it doesn't contain all the names of his company, which was the question.
Oh, the name. I'm sorry. I thought it was the number. Okay. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Concerning the online Portal to Texas, with Portal to Texas history, with the
speak
portal,
up just a little more,
thank
please.
You. With the Portal to Texas history being an online digital archive of our newspapers, maps, photographs, documents, there are other sites that do similar things. Texas Tides, the TexasBeyondHistory.net, maps, documents. With those other sites, do you see this Portal to Texas History as being seeing these other sites as in competition with what you all are doing? And by that I mean we all go for the same technology grants when it comes to museums, or education grants when it comes to universities. In that sense, just as what you had mentioned, sometimes historical organizations don't share kindly, that we don't play together too well on the playground. Or do you see this as a beneficial thing for the common good, these different sites?
Absolutely, and I know all those folks at the different digitization projects in Texas. I'm very involved statewide with different people doing the same things that we are, and we're very interested in working together, not duplicating efforts. One of the things that we've been working on as a group is through the Texas State Library and Archives Commission. They're not actually hosting materials, but they do have a gateway that is searching these different digital collections, and they've rolled maybe 10 collections into it. It's called Texas Heritage Online. So if you go there, you're searching the records of the Portal to Texas History, you're searching Texas Tides, you're searching, a number of other digital projects here in Texas that have been doing the work, and it's a big state. I mean, there's a lot of work to do. So I think all of us together can really kind of help to push that forward. So, yeah.
Yes, sir.
In answer to the woman's question about the roster of Juan Seguin's company at San Jacinto, an excellent source of information for this, as well as of the roster for every other company at San Jacinto, is Stephen L. Moore's book, 18 Minutes. And also in his book is the roster of all of the sick and guards at Harrisburg.
Yeah, there's a lot of information in there, most of it accurate.
I just wanted to let
Yes, ma'am.
everyone know where they could get some more information. It's not in your packets, but at the table out to your left out in the lobby, there's information on the Portal of Texas History, a brochure and a flyer, and I think it'd be a good idea if you each picked one up. They've got a lot more information plus the accurate email address or website. Thank you. Excellent.
Any more questions before we take a break? If you have questions that you want to put on your yellow sheets, to bring them up to the podium now, and we'll use them as our guide in the question and answer session that will begin at 4 o'clock. And so I will I'll let you go. My classes love this. I'll let you go 3 minutes early. Thank you.